You can try this at home.
So I've been working on making some trim for this curved area here, this curved wall, which I think is a cool idea, but ran into the KERF method. This is kiln wood from the store, Lowe's actually. You can see it barely bends. So then I read about how basically boards stiffen once they have dried out or been kilned. And so I had some stuff that's been sitting around outside for a year, a little more flexible. You can see I can flex it quite well, and it would flex enough to get around that curve. But the problem is it's very weak. I'm not really a fan of this KERF method. The other method I could use is lamination, but I don't think it's going to look good with this profile. This trim profile, which is totally custom, which is one reason I can't just buy polyurethane trim. And even if I could buy the polyurethane trim, it's not going to have the same wood look because this is all stained trim. And the last option is steaming, and I didn't really want to build a steam box and a whole rig for that. So instead, what I'd like to do is go cut down a tree so the wood is nice and green and super flexible. Hey, Betty. Oh, there's Sassy. And there's Betty. Betty is our baby pygmy goat that we got for Sassy when her sister died. Sassy, you are annoying. Although, if you could kill that tree for me, I'd be grateful. I need roughly 20 feet of trim that's flexible, that is, and roughly a 3.5 by 3.5 block from the center. And this seems to fit the bill. I think it's going to be tight, but if I start really low, if I get a really low cut, I think this will work. Of course, the goats followed me too, so. You having fun? Yeah? Alright. Really? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe probably a less than 10-year tree here, which is good because what I'm going for is flexible sapling kind of wood. But all right, I cut out this 12-foot section, which gosh, it's gonna be tight, so I don't think it's worth me grabbing my tractor. Actually, I have 2 tractors I could pull this with, but I'm just gonna instead use this product. It's called the Human Hilo. It comes with a kit with a couple straps where you can stick your arm in different spots. I've used this kind of thing a bunch of times. I can already tell this is a high sap period of time. This is almost June, really close. Actually, is it June? Might be time to do customer billings. Anyway, whenever it's this sappy, yikes, milling is tricky. The sun decided to come out, so it's quite hot. I used a Sawzall to take off any knots or high points, and I used my homemade draw knife made out of a lawnmower blade to just shave this side and the underside. And gosh, you can see there's kind of like a sap perspiration going on. I decided I'm not going to use my sawmill in the spirit of somebody without a sawmill being able to do this project, I decided I'm going to use my circular saw and make a couple cuts and potentially do a split if it's too high. Wanted to quickly talk about this blade I have here. It's a green blade. I forget the brand. I'll put it in the description when I dig it up. But basically, it's a blade specifically for pressure-treated wood, which is it's an extra thin blade, and it's designed to reduce the friction of the blade. And I found it works really well on green wood. So I feel a little bit bad putting my my circular saw through that. I definitely ended up getting twisted with some torsion on the grain once I got to about there. And then over here, it started to pinch. So there's some tension in the wood, which is not uncommon, but it's going to make this kind of tricky. I think I'm going to have some waste in the middle, which will be unavoidable. So as I'm doing my rip cuts to straighten this, I'm going to have to kind of be conservative. And I couldn't get the Sawzall for the life of me to follow both paths. You would think it would follow the path of least resistance, but on the other hand, this wedge is working surprisingly well. I ended up just jamming a hunk of 2x4 in as I go. Well, it's not perfect, but I'll take it. I have to say I'm pretty impressed just using that hand planer to even out the worst of it. It's actually pretty good. I'm surprised. Well, my wife didn't want to go get ice cream, so I just had some gin and Coke on the rocks. So what I'm going to do is take this width here and mark it on this side, something like this, and just cut the excess just to get it down to a little bit more of a manageable shape. Alright, I used my draw knife to remove most of the bark. This is 4 inches here. You can see I've shortened this to 4 inches, and I've tried to sort of keep it in line. Looks like the goats have been enjoying chewing up the bark and such from this. This somewhat sad looking pile of boards is my end result. I hope trees can't feel. I'm sure that they have some kind of, like, not exactly feeling in the way we feel, but some kind of like nervous system of sorts. Like they can, you know, this tree's probably still alive and I'm like peeling off pieces of it. Does that feel like pain? I hope not. Okay, routed. This stuff does not like to route because it's wet. So you get like these long tear outs. It still routes okay. It's just you can't really sand this stuff, and so it's all has all these little tendrils sort of. I'm so tired. Well, if nothing else, it's kind of cool that I was able to pick a tree, cut it down, drag it over, use nothing more than a circular saw, a planer, and a table saw, well, and a router, to turn it into trim in maybe 6 hours-ish. I don't hear any cracking yet. Wow! I can put some pretty serious bend on this, and I don't even hear creaking or anything. I have just never tried this before, but I mean, this was literally hours ago a tree, and that has some real bend to it. Maybe this will work. Well, here's my curved trim. I just now noticed how screwed up that is. That one is like fairly even on this side. This one, what happened? Huh? Start of a split there. A little bit off on the alignment on this side. 2 tie-down straps. Quite tight. yeah, if I screw a board in there and then just bang, 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 I might be able to just... As you can see, I think this will do. I'm going to let this go for about a week, I think, and then that should dry it quite a bit because this is a conditioned space. So it's been 6 days in air conditioning, and I did actually take this out into the sun one day. It's been quite humid out though, so I was avoiding that a lot. And you can see the wood is still pretty flexible. In fact, I can even see it flex down there a little bit when I flex up here. And what I've decided to do is I wanted to give this a week, and I'm just going to put it in place. I'm going to install it, but I'm not going to trim the edges fully. I'll trim like this side, I guess, and let it overlap more than it needs to be on this side. And the reason is I'm going to let it season the rest of the way in place. Whoa. Pretty much shot right back out. Interestingly, the most tightly curved one mostly retained that angle. I just hope it's flexible enough now. Yeah, it looks like it'll be fine. So I was able to bend this around, but what I had to do, because this had kind of bowed in the middle, it prevented me from being able to wrap it very well because this top part couldn't be against the wall. So I just used my mounted sander and just went over it. I did a quick join right here with some screws and wood glue. Not much to see, I just matched the angle as best I could using a chisel. Unfortunately, it looks like I have just a hair of mold right here, and I think it's because it's the outermost sapwood. You can see on this one that did not happen. It might also be more exposure to the air conditioning than on this side, come to think of it. Regardless, this did not shrink as much as I had thought it might in this dimension, so I'm going to have to trim it down by about 1/4 inch, which is what I left extra for drying. Well, this sanded pretty well. It's definitely not completely dry though. I'm actually surprised at how wet it still is. But I can't tell, for example, there are these little white marks, and I don't know if they're mold or if they're just dried resin. I don't know if you can see that. There he is, that's a big moth. Huge! The stain is not adhering to those white spots, so I'm pretty sure they're actually resin that had dried because the tree was so fresh. So that's fine. I'm not too worried about it. It's not a big deal. This is with the first coat of stain urethane in one. All right, after 2 coats of stain and letting this sit out for an extra 24 hours. So it sat around in my barn for probably like 52 hours actually. And it dried up so much from that because it's been over 90 degrees every day. I felt the wood and I was like, this doesn't really need any special treatment to dry, I don't think. And as you can see here, I have 2 to 3 millimeter gap in some spots. If I had some studs to kind of drive into, I'm sure I could close that gap better, but I don't. So, and frankly, with the dark color of the stain, you'd pretty much have to be looking for that gap if you really wanted to find it. And I think this one turned out pretty well also. Again, looks like I have about a 2 to 3 millimeter gap in a small portion of it. So I'm just gonna call this project done. It's good enough. And you might think my standards are perhaps not as high as they could be, but I've been working on this addition for 2 years. It's time to just be done, you know. I have to caulk up where the tile meets some of these areas on the wall. And the last step is to just touch up with the same color of stained urethane all of the like screw holes and joins and everything, just to get rid of the raw wood that's hanging out in some spots. So here you can see all of the trim along the bottom. So that's it. If you want to do some curved trim, you can potentially just cut down a tree and rip it into the board and dry it for a while. And the result is pretty good. So I hope you found that helpful or interesting. If you happen to make a piece of trim like I did by cutting down a tree, leave a comment and let me know how it goes. So as always, thanks for watching. While I'm at it, I'll show you, I trimmed this in oak. That's actually from a tree in my backyard, which is, I'm on 7 acres. So I cut down some oak trees to build my workshop, and I kept them, I milled them, and I've been using these pieces of wood for years. And so there's some interesting like dry rock patterns along with other like sapwood patterns. They're all very unique pieces that you'd probably have a hard time acquiring from another source because they wouldn't make the grade. You know, they're not in the best shape. But I like them. I like that quality about it. They all have a story, sort of. And here you can see this is trimmed with some oak that's on an angle. And if you are interested in this art piece here, check out my video. I'll put a link in the description about how I made this. It's a reconfigurable mosaic using 4x4 pieces of wood and a 3D printed matrix that holds it all. So this is one of several large 3D prints I've worked on now. So this room is pretty much done now that I think about it, which feels a little strange. My wife is going to force me to get my 3D printers out of here. I'll have to find another good spot for them. Yeah, 2 years, and this is essentially done. That feels weird. In this space over here, I'm considering building some built-in shelves with a curve on them. That's another big project. For now, we're just gonna like stick some shoes in here and maybe like a standalone coat rack thing over here. So nothing built in for now, which is a little bit boring. I was originally going to put like stained glass up here. I have the equipment to make my own potentially, but I'm 3D printing a raptor, a life-size raptor skeleton, and so I think I'm just going to stick that up there instead. It's super cool anyway. And I have another video on printing big, which is how I 3D printed this large manifold to hide the HVAC lines that are exposed on the wall here. I'll put a link in the description for that as well.